start with you, Gemma. Jacinda Ardern, I tell you what, coming here bleating about the fact that we're sending home the New Zealand criminals to the place where they are still citizens and they never made the transition to being citizens here. Why should we keep their rubbish?
Well, indeed, why should we keep their rubbish? I think it was very, very cute. I mean, Jacinda Ardern is playing to, a friendly audience in Victoria, if ever there was one. I mean, she's basically been embraced with open arms by the socialist state of Victoria. It doesn't matter what a person where a person comes from. If they're a citizen of another country and they've violated our laws, we have every right to boot them back and remove them from society. Why should Australian taxpayers pay for them? It's very, very cute for her to come over to another country and morally posterise the way she has been. I don't know if it were in a reciprocal set of circumstances whether it would be tolerated nor appreciated. But again, like I said, she's gone to Victoria. It was like Albanese is listening to her, Peter, and he came to a pub in Fremantle to hear what the people had to say. He could have just had a branch meeting or a caucus meeting in Sydney, would have heard the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting, Kevin Donnelly. She's completely loved by the left, right? And she's held up as this sort of lioness of the left. But, of course, people have to remember how she got into office in the first place. She did a deal with Winston Peters. Last night's speech, she was decrying populism and nationalism and all the things that Winston Peters stands for, his party stands for. He is the one who got her into the job. She made him Deputy Prime Minister as a nice little sweet thank you. But the left can't help but just sort of lay down palms when she comes into town.
You're right, and as we know, her government didn't... Well, she's now in government, but at the last election, they didn't even win the election in terms of the majority of votes. She's only there because of Winston Peters. The other point, as a younger girl, if I can use that gender-specific pronoun, but as a younger girl, she actually, I think, was part of the Socialist International Movement. She worked in London for a fair while with the Labor Party there. So she's got form. I mean, it's very hard to take the high moral ground, I'd suggest, for her, given her background and how she now rules. She's very good at, working the system in terms of the publicity. I know after the horrific attacks on the mosque in New Zealand, the mosques, she came out and she played that sort of gender, soft, caring, feminine game, which, as we know now, is just an archetype that males sort of enforce on women. So I really do have doubts about her.
Hey, just before I go to Jeremy, what's this rumour that she's sort of in contention for a Nobel Peace Prize for that work in Christchurch?
Well, I'm hearing that on the Twitter sphere and on the internet. She really falls into that same sort of group, the Canadian Prime Minister, whether it was his role in terms of immigration and how he's been opposing Trump. But when you look at this whole New Zealand issue, I don't want to channel President Trump, but I'd be saying, if I was the government here, go back to where you came from.
Yeah, I tell you what, Jeremy Samet, if Christchurch equals Nobel Peace Prize, and all Obama really had to do was win the election, basically just get out of bed, and he got one as well. Aren't we devaluing something that used to be very much revered?
Well, I think that's undoubtedly true, and I think, unfortunately, for a long time, the credibility of the Nobel Prize has been undermined, particularly by the decision to give it to President Obama before he'd almost literally done anything, or just hardly had his feet under the desk. So I think that's a real issue. But I think, unfortunately, I think what Jacinda Ardern has done is like pick another... Well, obviously, it's in a sense a touchy-feely issue, a soft issue, and that's what seems to get her a lot of credit with the left internationally, but also in Australia. And I just thought it was a very strange priority for her to have. Like, she's the Prime Minister of a nation state. She's, not a prison social worker. I would have thought that it would have been a much better conversation with Scott Morrison to find out how you win an election in your own right.
Well, yeah, and look, let's be very, very clear, and I made this point in my editorial. These are their citizens who came to Australia. It wasn't that long ago you come here from New Zealand, never be an Aussie, never pay tax, but scoop up our welfare pool. These guys committed a crime, predominantly men, predominantly drug-fuelled bikies and all sorts of undesirables. Go home. We don't want them here, and she can't whinge about that. She needs to rehabilitate them in her own country.